Thank you, Peter, Mayor Lozo, all of our What's Next speakers, all the speakers from the business meeting, and to Shakapella. Thank you so much for coming down to be with us. I would also like to add my personal gratitude and admiration to Jim Varnum and Jim Putnam for their service. So this is a familiar setting for me. Not this stage, but this bridge behind me. It's in Stoddard, on the north branch of the Kentucook River, just upstream from a great little trout pool. I've walked across it to get a better view of the water. I've waded under it and marveled at its grace and its strength. This is one of 7 stone arch bridges in Cheshire and Hillsborough counties. They are distinctly of New Hampshire, carved from granite, hauled by oxen, pieced together with skill and care, built to last. I try not to overdo my metaphors, but tonight it's just inescapable. I look at this bridge and I think of how critical each of the stones is in its construction. And so that's where I'm going to start my remarks, by naming the foundation stones, the building blocks of this remarkable institution. From there, I'll talk a bit about the presence and the impact that we have today, all of us together. And then I'll share my view about what lies ahead. The first foundation stone is the trust and the vision of donors who have chosen the foundation as their partner in philanthropy. Since 1962, more than 1,600 families, individuals, and businesses have created grant-making and scholarship funds, including scores of friends here tonight. Last year alone, as Eric told you, gifts, new gifts, gifts to existing funds and new funds topped $48 million. It all starts with you. The boards. The trust of those donors is earned in no small part by the caliber of the volunteers who serve as directors, committee members, and regional advisors. Look no further than the people who are on the stage or recognized tonight and at past annual meetings. In all, more than 100 citizen leaders engaged in governance, grant-making, and fiscal affairs. Frankly, my peers around the country think we are nuts. 9 boards, they have a hard enough time with 1. But in a state where volunteerism is in our DNA, it just works better this way. Staff. The professionals who staff this organization have always stood out. These are 42 of the most talented and dedicated colleagues imaginable. I want to introduce them to you and ask them to stand as I name their department. Please hold your applause till the end. A whistle or a yahoo when you recognize someone is fine. First, the program department, grant-making, student aid, and civic leadership, led by Katie Marrow. And if you could turn around, a lot of staff are in the back, so I'd really love you to see these faces. The philanthropy group, working with current and new donors and professional advisors, is led by Sherry Landry. The Tillotson Fund in the North Country, you saw a piece of their connection with Shakapella, led by Rachel Stewart. The finance and IT team, led by Michael Wilson, and operations and communications, led by Helen Goodman. Thank you all for being my colleagues. The next block, foundation stone, are all of you who we have the pleasure of calling partners. Far too many to mention. Nonprofits are the most visible. Some 1,500 of you receive grants from the foundation annually, thanks to donors. But we also collaborate with state government, federal government, towns, businesses, universities, school districts, and of course, fellow funders. This is New Hampshire. Nothing happens alone. And finally, tying it all together, for the past 25 years has been my predecessor, my friend, the irreplaceable, the irrepressible Lou Feldstein. So here we are. On this base has been built a singular community foundation, recognized nationally for its size, its impact, the breadth of people engaged. I'll show a few pictures in a minute. But first, what is a community foundation? There are 80,000 private foundations in America, started by families, individuals, corporations. You think of Gates and Ford and MacArthur and Pew, closer to home, Bean, Cogswell, Endowment for Health. They do fantastic work. And then there is this group of 700, roughly, community foundations around the country, of which we are one. The major difference is this. Private foundations have one donor or a few donors who are closely connected. A community foundation is a collective, or perhaps, in today's parlance, a network. A network not only of charitable funds, but of the ideas, the aspirations of hundreds and hundreds. Sometimes these donors act independently, sometimes collectively. Some love art, while others are driven by social justice. Some are inspired by nature, others by education, and many use their giving through the foundation to weave together all those needs into community well-being. They are all united by one common bond, and this distinguishes a community foundation. That bond, a passion for a place, for a town, a city, a region, a state, a community, no matter how you define it. The author Norman Maclean wrote, "If you don't know the ground, you're probably wrong about nearly everything else." If we had a motto for the foundation, that would be it. Because knowing the ground is what a community foundation is about. Through our donors, our regional advisors, our staff, this foundation stays deeply rooted in 300 communities across 8 regions covering all of New Hampshire and parts of Maine and Vermont. In that sense, we are a hyper-local institution tuned to the needs of Rollinsford and Hinsdale, Berlin and Hudson, Chichester and Berwick and Norwich and your town. And yet, even as we celebrate the distinct character of each region, we also work to unite the whole. In a time where so much divides us, parochializes us, this institution is a unifier. Donor passion and vision, superb board and staff, smart partners, knowing the ground. As I travel the state, listening to so many of you, it is deeply humbling and inspiring to feel the energy and the power of our shared mission of improving quality of life. Together, we are helping to care for neighbors at a time when they need it more than ever, enriching lives through arts and culture, helping those most in need, advancing learning at every age, protecting land and water, creating community spaces, providing scholarships to hundreds of students, and collaborating to tackle issues like clean energy and substance use disorders. And we are working to encourage citizen dialogue and engagement. Here's what just 1 year of our collective efforts look like. Grants made, scholarships awarded, new funds established, focus work on key issues. And that's just a year. Think of the impact over the decades. So what's next? Standing on this foundation of strength, we have the rare privilege and the sobering obligation to think long-term, to look ahead. I start with fundamental questions about a world that is changing so fast, it's hard to keep it in focus. In the wake of this grinding recession, what will be the economy of northern New England, and what will be New Hampshire's niche? Who's leaving the state, and why? Where are the most troubling gaps? In income, race, education, access to technology? Are the gaps growing? How are we welcoming new residents, not only those from neighboring states, but increasingly from Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe? And what does downsizing of government mean for this charitable sector? State budget cuts of 10% or more, probably more, will have profound long-term impacts on education, on healthcare, on the lives of the least advantaged among us. How will we respond? Philanthropy has to step up. not just because there will be fewer public dollars, because a fundamental realignment between the public sector and the charitable sector is underway. We can't replace cuts in public funding, and we shouldn't try. But we can and we must innovate, collaborate better. We need to test, to learn, to adapt more quickly, to find brilliant ideas and bring them to scale, like some of those that you heard tonight. We need to help nonprofits and those they serve to advocate for critical needs, to have a more effective voice in their communities, with policymakers, in the media. We need to be ready for the next generation of donors who will have different expectations, as we heard tonight, about the tools we use and who will look at philanthropy as extensions of their networked world. That's why we have launched MyNHCF, our online donor portal, and why we're exploring new solutions for donors, such as mission investing and venture philanthropy. And perhaps above all, in this week that we lost Governor Peterson, a statesman without equal, an exemplar of civility and respect in public discourse, we need to work on our civic dialogue. I sense a thirst for venues where thoughtful people can craft a vision for this state and our communities and develop those meaningful solutions, informed by data and not bound by political cycles. That's why we fund the independent think tanks like the Center for Public Policy Studies and the Carsey Institute, and 21st century town squares like the Forum on New Hampshire's Future, New Hampshire Listens, and NHPR. The path ahead won't be simple, and it's not just a slow economy and tight public budgets. Americans feel unmoored from the institutions that have long anchored us. Our collective trust in the four pillars of society: government, financial markets, organized religion, and media are at all-time lows. The income gap is widening, and opportunities are narrowing for the middle class. Our neighbors are looking for anchors to windward in an uncertain sea. We need to be one of those anchors. I'll close by recalling Governor Gregg's Commission on New Hampshire in the 21st Century, which convened 20 years ago. My first mentor and boss at the time, Paul Boffinger of the Forest Society, was co-chair of that commission with Cotton Cleveland. Lou was a member, as were Linda DeLeonis, John Harrigan, Signe McQuaid, Harold Janeway, Susan Leahy, Bernie Streeter, Jim Varnum, and many others. Commission members had markedly different backgrounds and views, but they understood New Hampshire and its values, and they found remarkable common ground. Their final report was titled simply, "New Hampshire, My Responsibility." In the report lay the seeds of Leadership New Hampshire, civic profiles, community cornerstones, LCHIP, and other partnerships that have strengthened our social capital and our living landscape. The Commission did its work in 1991, during a recession that was deeper for New Hampshire than this one. 20,000 people had fled the state, 5 banks had failed, and the state budget was falling short. There was plenty to divide us then, as there is now, and yet those prominent citizens focused not on their differences, not on divisive rhetoric, but on shared responsibility. Especially memorable from their final report was this line: "People come to New Hampshire or stay in New Hampshire to be independent. We discover, paradoxically, that independence requires a community effort." Under the mainstream of rugged individualism, there has always been a practical current of interdependence and cooperation. As New Hampshire grows, our sense of mutual dependence must become as strong as our independence, or we will lose both. Wise words, more true today even than then. We'd do well to heed them. Our foundation will do our part to build on the cornerstones laid so well, to be a trusted partner that knows the ground, a long-term leader in a short-term world, a force to act bigger and to adapt better. That's what we are called to do. join us. Thank you.